Retirement planning's about knowing how much you can safely spend in retirement. It's about how you create a retirement paycheck. You're no longer getting a paycheck from your job. It's about dealing with things that you've never dealt with. Social Security, Medicare, which are huge financial issues for retirees that you have to deal with, you have to learn about, and yet no one's ever taught you that. It was 2018, 2019. It had been a long time since we had had a big down market. And then we hit the COVID year. We had a big down market, but for only about 3 months. And then it was right back. So that didn't bother anyone. Finally, we got to 2022, and not only were stocks down pretty good, so were bonds. So the retirees really felt that. So they started to understand sequence of returns risk.
What happens when you make your plan, you get into retirement, and it doesn't at all look like what you planned? Do you ever see that happen?
Only with every retiree. Very few of us have a plan and stick to it. And sometimes it's because we're still changing people. You know, what I enjoyed doing the day I retired, I had never heard of pickleball, I don't think. Now I play pickleball 3 or 4 times a week.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Becky, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your hosts. We're here to help you with your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting from.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together. Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. And obviously, I am not Bill Yount, but that is because he is on vacation. Bill and his wife, Karen, are living their best life in Morocco right now. They are taking a bucket list trip for Karen's birthday. And he wanted me to be sure to tell the audience that this trip was done with his vacation sinking fund and with travel rewards. So they are having a great time in Morocco. So I have with me today my special guest co-host, Mark Trautman. You've heard Mark several times on the show. He's been a guest, and he's also helped me out with the Catching Up to FI on the Road episodes, of which we have one coming out later this week. We've got a 2-part series on a group called the Slackers, and part 1 will be out later this week. So I wanted to give Mark just a minute to give us a feel for who is Mark Trautman, and so that you've heard his voice several times. So I wanted you to know a little bit more about him. So Mark, thanks for being here today.
Oh, it's always awesome to be here with you.
Yeah. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So my background is my entire career I spent in investment management. I grew up on the East Coast, started working on Wall Street way back when in 1987. And if you know what happened in 1987, it was a very interesting year to start your career. But I spent my entire career in portfolio management on the equity side. I actually went and walked in and quit my job in 2008 because I wanted a lifestyle shift. I wanted to move out west to where I live now in Crested Butte, Colorado. And they actually convinced me to continue working remotely. So, of course, I asked myself, I should have done this a long time ago. But
and that was way before working remote was a thing, right?
Yeah. So we were pioneers in that realm, that's for sure. But I did ultimately decide to retire at the end of 2015. We had been kind of on our own financial independence path without knowing that was a thing. When we were in our 20s, my wife and I, we read The Wealthy Barber, The Millionaire Next Door, and then we just kind of came up with this motto of make some, save and invest, live on the rest. So just pay yourself first and live on the difference. And it worked out. A bunch of years later, we realized that I thought maybe I didn't need to work anymore, but I needed a backup plan. So I decided to get my certified financial planner designation. I sat for the work, the capstone study. You do a whole bunch of case study reviews. Of course, you do your own financial plan. You're not required to, but you're going to do it. And I realized I didn't need to work anymore. I really didn't need that income going forward. So then I started deciding, well, what should I do now? Fortunately, a neighbor asked me who happens to be the guidance counselor at our high school, she asked me to help teach a financial literacy class at the high school. And this was right in 2016. And I jumped at it. I thought this would be a great opportunity to use some of the things I learned in the CFP curriculum, and I could bring that forward to a population that is very young and new in their potentially careers and college starting. And I wish I had this information when I was their age. And then ultimately, I was asked to actually design the course, and I kind of created it around the financial independence learnings, some of the CFP curriculum. And so now it's a full-blown 7-course program, which I did put out there. So I have a blog called Mark's Money Mind, and it's on the blog. You can actually see the whole course. There's no cost or anything. I was just getting a lot of people asking me about it. So I decided, well, let me just put up the recordings that I did in 2020 during COVID because I couldn't be in the class. I had to record all the sessions. So that's basically what's on the website. So if you want to see it, it's there. And I have, I'm going to hold myself accountable here and say this publicly.
You heard it here first.
My goal in 2024 is to actually create a podcast under Mark's Money Mind. And by the time this is released, that may actually be some episodes out there. So now my feet are being held to the fire. But the goal is to kind of continue that education beyond just my own little community here in Crested Butte, Colorado, and the high school individuals. And my daughter is 24 and her friends are always asking questions. So I was like, well, let me just do it in podcast form. And so we'll see where that goes. So if, maybe look it up, maybe it'll already be in your podcast. And I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
I think that's great. I'm looking forward to that.
You might be asked to come on. You never know.
Well, that would be fun.
And it's not might. You will be asked.
That'll be fun. So, Mark, what does life look like for you now? What's going on in your life today?
Well, I'm very involved in the financial independence community. That's actually where we met. So we met at Camp FI in 2019. And as I recall, you do like this little who you are kind of thing, a minute or two about who you are. And I'd mentioned teaching the financial literacy class in the high school. And you had mentioned that, I want to go talk to that person. And then when you got up, you talked about driving cars on the racetrack. And my wife and I did the same thing. We're like, wow, we have a lot in common. So we also said to ourselves, we need to go meet those people. And that's how you and I and Marge and Stephen first met.
That's right. Yeah, we kind of made a beeline to each other after the break. Yep, that was fun. That was fun. And then, so you've got, let's see, economy is coming up, and we've talked a lot in the Facebook group about anyone that has the possibility, the time and the resources to go to that event really should take advantage of that. So tell us a little bit about your role this year with economy.
Yeah, so I was asked to be part of a panel that will be doing a case study on the main stage. Jackie is also going to be on that panel. Frank Vasquez is also going to be on that panel. So provided that we get a good case study subject. So if you're listening to this, well, actually, this will occur before economy, right? So you can apply to be one of the case study subjects. And I think it's only going to be one person that will be selected. But provided that we get someone to volunteer to get up there with us and go through their situation, that will be one of the main stage events.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's great. You and I have been involved with some case studies at Camp FI's, and I know that it sounds crazy to open up your real numbers to a group of people, but it's always been, in my opinion, it's always been very informative and educational for everyone in the room, not just the person who's asking the questions about their own money.
Yeah, and that will be one of the goals, I think, is to hopefully find somebody who's willing to get up there and where their situation may apply to other people, or at least segments of their situation, so that a lot of people can learn. And also just think about how you even go through the process of going to figure out whatever goal it is you're trying to achieve. financially and non-financially, how do you achieve that goal?
Right, right. Yeah, give a way to think through it, a framework
Right.
of how to do
So
that.
it's more the process than the solution. Obviously, this individual hopefully will come away with something that they feel was valuable, but hopefully everyone in the audience can also just see the process that has gone through to figure out these questions.
Right, right. Well, that sounds great. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Mark. It gives everybody a little bit better idea of who you are and your involvement in the whole FI community, which has been very, very helpful to a lot of folks.
Yeah. And then you guys interviewed me, I think it was on episode 12. So if you want to hear more of my ramblings, you can go over to episode 12 and listen to that.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, we've got a very special guest with us today. It's Kevin Lyles, and I know Kevin from the RRC, or the Rock Retirement Club, which is Roger Whitney's subscription club that Mark and I happen to be a part of, and Kevin's one of the coaches there. So let me just tell you a little bit about Kevin. Kevin Lyles is a retired lawyer with 30 years in corporate law and is currently a retirement guru, and even more currently, he is the coolest grandpa on the street. Kevin happens to be a new grandpa. So Kevin teaches in the Rock Retirement Club and the Retirement Researcher Academy. And Kevin, that is Wade Fowles' group. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. He serves by creating robust educational resources, hosting webinars, and sharing his wisdom. Kevin also specializes in assisting professionals and executives as they make retirement transitions. He particularly enjoys helping people with the life side of retirement planning. And I personally know that Kevin can bring his A game to the pickleball court. Kevin actually taught me to play pickleball at the RRC Roundup last fall. We're excited to have a conversation today with Kevin about some of the aspects of planning for retirement, both financial and the non-financial sides. And I have to apologize. I actually skipped a segment here. I want to tell you that Kevin retired in 2017 and earned his Chartered Retirement Planning Counselor designation and became a certified retirement coach in 2019. And that's the part we really want to dive into today. So Kevin, tell us just a little bit about yourself, and then tell us about these coaching designations.
Sure. Thanks, Becky. Well, as you said, I am retired. And even though I'm doing all of this retirement coaching and retirement planning stuff, I consider myself retired. It's really been my passion project, part of my lifelong learning project since I retired 6 years ago. I'm married happily. We have 2 adult children who are off on their own, our youngest of whom just gave us our first grandchild with his wife. And so Oliver Christian, you'll listen to this someday and hear Papa doing a podcast. Oliver will be 1 month old on Friday. So
by then he'll probably say, "What is a podcast? What was that thing that they used to do way back when?"
That's right. It'd be like handing my cassette tapes to my kids when they went to college.
That's right. That's right. What's this huge CD that you asked me?
So I started because I was retiring at 55. So I was a fire candidate myself back then. I really wanted to study retirement planning because I figured, hey, if you're going to retire early, you better get it right. You don't want to be a failure at retiring early. So I started studying retirement planning first, and that's, Becky, led up to that CRPC designation I got and really enjoyed that. That's really what the CRPC designation is. You know what CFPs are? It's the retirement planning piece of the CFP curriculum. That's what it is. I wasn't interested in all the others. Actually, there's 6 pieces to the CFP curriculum: financial planning, insurance and risk management, investments, tax planning, retirement planning. I felt like I already knew the investment side because I had worked on my own investments my whole career, and I was a finance major back in college. And the tax planning, I did a lot of tax law work when I was practicing law. So I felt like I knew those areas. The retirement planning piece and the employee benefits piece of that, really didn't know about. And I think most people don't. So I wanted to study that and learn it. I really started doing it for myself. And then, as you mentioned, Roger Whitney started the Rock Retirement Club in 2018, and it gave me a vehicle for helping others. And that's what I started doing.
So, Kevin, you have a retirement coach designation. What does a retirement coach do?
Sure. Well, and let me tell you how I got into that. So I studied all of that retirement planning stuff that Mark, you know so well, having done that during your
all
career.
All too well.
But after about a year of retirement, it's like, okay, I've got that side figured out. The money is okay. I know how to do that. What's next? And what's next is hopefully a really long life in front of me. And so I wanted to think about the retirement transition issues that people face. They were coming up with club members in the club, and I wanted to help them. So retirement coach and a certified retirement coach, there are a couple organizations that certify them, but it's basically helping retirees make the transition into retirement. And really, there's sort of two aspects to it that I do. They're almost 50% of the time doing it. Half the time, it's helping someone deal with a problem they're having in the retirement transition. And we can talk about what a bunch of those are. But the other half, and the half that's probably more fun, is helping people get ready to really thrive when they're in retirement. Because a lot of us, what we do if we don't think about this is your retirement life is just the life you had going into retirement minus 40 or 50 hours working a job. Mm-hmm. And so what you try to do as a retirement coach is help people fill those 40 to 50 hours with something that's really meaningful to them. And so that's what retirement coaching is all about.
Yeah, I wish I had a retirement coach when I was approaching retirement, because I was doing all the wrong things, retiring from something and not to something. And it took me a couple of years to kind of figure out what I was going to do in retirement. And fortunately, I just kind of left my options open and things fell into my lap, but I did not have a plan. So I'm very interested to have this discussion on how could I have done this better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're not at all unusual. And in fact, what I tell a lot of people I work with to do is take the first 3 to 6 months. For some people, it's up to a year, what we call the retirement honeymoon phase, when you're enjoying getting up, not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the sound of the birds or whatever's outside your window. And just relax and unwind. Maybe do some of those projects around the house you've put off. Do some of those travel adventures that you had planned. But that's not going to be your life in retirement. That's a wonderful part of it. But the leisure side of retirement, that's where people make a big mistake, is they go in thinking retirement is all leisure. And those are the people who become dissatisfied, become bored. A lot of people become depressed. We see a lot of divorce. So you can skip some of that by being thoughtful on the front end.
But that's what all the ads say we're supposed to do, aren't we? Aren't we supposed to just sit on the beach and have cocktails? And all the investment ads say that's what retirement's all about. That's not what it's about?
Yeah, at least the pictures have changed, Mark. Remember the pictures 10 years ago, the pictures you saw always had someone sitting on a park bench feeding birds in front of them. Remember those pictures? That was the picture of the retirement.
I'm dating myself, but I do.
Yeah. The Mary Poppins picture, right?
Yes, exactly. And that was what we thought about retirement. And quite honestly, for maybe our parents, certainly our grandparents' generation, that's what retirement was. By the time you retired from your job, you were pretty much done. You were exhausted. And now, if you notice the pictures, you'll occasionally still see a park bench picture, but more often you'll see golf, tennis, pickleball, out sailing. You'll see those kind of pictures.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the pickleball ones to come out more prevalently, because it used to be golf and it used to be tennis, and now let's see more pickleball.
Yeah, and we have to have, before we're done here today, let's have a pickleball discussion, Becky, because I want to talk more about that. What a great thing for retirees.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Mark, I have to tell you, I saw an ad for a cell phone company that advertises to senior citizens. And the picture was somebody surfing. And I was like, yes, yes, Mark and I have done the surfing thing.
There we go. We started a trend.
We did. Oh my goodness. All right, Kevin, I tell you what, we've got this discussion broken into two parts just to give it a little roadmap. We're going to talk about the money side and then the life side. So let's start with the money side. And I want to sort of keep in mind who our audience is. Our audience is mostly folks that have sort of woken up late in life. They haven't, like I did, haven't taken care of their money really the way maybe they should have or they wish they had. And so now they're facing some tough decisions. And some of our audience might actually be having to work a little longer than they would like to. But let's start out talking about the money side. And so we want to talk about retirement planning versus financial advice during the accumulation phase. So tell us how planning in retirement and planning for retirement can be different.
Sure. We have very simple goals when we're accumulating money. We're trying to grow as much money as we can, right? Now, maybe we want to know, do we have enough to retire? That's always an important question. But that's really all it amounts to. You invest in things that you think will give you a big return. You invest as much as you can. You save as much as you can and invest, and you try to grow it. And most of the financial advice industry is geared toward that. In other words, that's the old assets under management model, right? You pay a 1% fee for the money that they invest for you. And that's your big goal. When you get near retirement, though, you have some different goals. And that's where retirement planning comes in. And it really is, I think, it is a subset or a specialization of financial planning, but it's an important one to know about, I think, because retirement planning's about knowing how much you can safely spend in retirement. It's about how you create a retirement paycheck. You're no longer getting a paycheck from your job. It's about dealing with things that you've never dealt with, Social Security, Medicare, which are huge financial issues for retirees that you have to deal with, you have to learn about, and yet no one's ever taught you that. None of us learned about Social Security when we were in college, right? And Medicare. And those are big issues for retirees. Now, if you're retiring before 65, you've got some other healthcare issues to deal with because you're not yet eligible for Medicare. And then the other piece of retirement planning that is very different from what you've experienced before retirement are the tax issues. There are tax issues affecting retirees that you just don't deal with when you're working. And so you've got to navigate those things too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was a great episode, and that was episode 54 that came out on January 7th. And on this show, they interviewed Mike Piper about Social Security. So if you are interested in learning more about that, I definitely would go back to that episode. That was an awesome episode. I think it should be at the top of everyone's list. It was a well done episode. So I agree. That's definitely a subject that a lot of people are not familiar with and just assume, oh, I retire, I should claim Social Security. And it's not as simple as that. By no means is it that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and all the research tells us that people leave tens of thousands of dollars on the table by making mistakes in claiming their Social Security. And then a lot of bankruptcies among seniors are because they didn't make the right choices in Medicare and they left themselves exposed to risk that they didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Becky and Bill, put on your notes to have a Medicare expert on the show.
We definitely need to. Kevin, I'm actually on the other side of both of those issues. I'm taking my Social Security. Stephen is not taking it yet, but I'm taking mine. And we are both over 65, so we're into Medicare. And I have to say, those were two huge decisions, and they feel on the front side of it, they feel so much bigger almost than they really are in some cases. And it's because you don't know anything about it. And you have to do your own research for Social Security, but then there are groups that can help you make decisions about Medicare. And I know that Roger works with Danielle at Boomer Benefits to help folks make decisions about Medicare, because Social Security is, for the most part, an irrevocable decision. And some of your Medicare decisions can be irrevocable decisions. And so They are two biggies. Do you have any other suggestions of how someone would prepare for those two decisions?
Yes, I think you have to want to learn about them, first of all. And fortunately, there's a lot of help out there. So, Becky, I think what you said on the Medicare side, get one of these independent broker companies. They don't charge you money, they get paid by the companies, the insurance companies, but they can help you navigate and make the decisions on Medicare. On Social Security, I hate the Social Security claiming calculators because most people think of it as a break even decision. You're guessing, you're rolling the dice on how long you're going to live. Well, the biggest aspect of it for married couples is the survivor benefits aren't often taken into account in those calculators and the break even analysis.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this is a bigger problem with overall retirement planning, I think a lot of people are not planning to live as long as they're going to live today.
Oh, okay.
We hear of life expectancy now, I think in the United States, I think it's around 74, 75 for men and women. That's at age zero. That's people who were born 75 years ago are living to that. People who were born much later are living much longer. And if you are, say, a 65-year-old retiree couple, there's over a 25% chance that one of you is going to live to 95. So you have to plan for that. And so back to the Social Security question, if you're just planning on breaking even at 83 and you say, well, I'm not going to live that long, are you sure you're not? And to me, I value having that security. It's inflation adjusted payments. So I love the strategy you described, Becky, which is one of you claimed at full retirement age, the other is going to wait till 70. And that way you've got a survivor benefit that will grow to its max for whichever one of you lives the longest.
Absolutely. And Mike made that point of that it lasts as long as either person is alive. So it makes a lot of sense for the higher wage earner to wait. My mother lived to 99. So I definitely have an older age. My spreadsheets run out to age 100. I have to.
Well, imagine what I'm facing. My new grandson, we just took a 5-generation picture. My wife's grandmother just turned 2 weeks ago, 107. We celebrated her birthday with her and took a 5-generation picture. So if you've got a plan to 107, forget the break even. The way I've always looked at Social Security is if I die tomorrow, I'm not going to miss that money that I didn't claim.
That's true.
Right. And I think, like you said, longevity risk is one of the major things that retirees should be thinking about. And this is one way to do it. Are there other ways to kind of mitigate that longevity risk, in your opinion? How else might people make sure they don't run out of money?
Yeah, you've heard of all the different retirement spending styles. I'm in the safety first category, so I like having...
Can you explain what those styles are?
Sure. Let me explain the two big ones, and then there's sort of a couple in between the two. The first one is the traditional, you just live off of your investments. And that's where things like the 4% rule and the Trinity study came in, saying if you have an investment portfolio, you can draw 4% a year, and you're pretty safe that will last you for at least a 30-year retirement. So that's one way of doing it. I call it the total return method or spending style. The safety first is sort of the other end of that, which is I want to make sure my spending will last as long as I last. My money will last as long as I last, and I can spend what I want to spend. So safety first, you look at things like Social Security, pensions, and annuity income. And then there are various degrees to which you can do it. Some people talk about just securing your base, your fixed expenses, if you will, your non-discretionary expenses. I went further. I'm more conservative, and I didn't want to fail as an early retiree, so I wanted to secure not only the fixed expenses, but our normal living expenses, including our discretionary expenses. And so I'm fortunate to have a pension that will start and Social Security that will start. I purchased an annuity to supplement that to cover our base spending. So that's sort of the safety first school. in between that, there are lots of different methods. There's what's called bucketing, the bucket strategy, or time segmentation, where you invest in different tranches. And say the first 5 years you want safe, the second 5 years is sort of intermediate, maybe some bonds, some preferred stock, dividend paying stocks, those sorts of things. And then long term would be your growth stocks. So you can sort of divide up your retirement that way. That's sort of a middle strategy. It gives you some safety and relief from what's called sequence of returns risk, which I know you've talked about with some of your guests before, which is basically just when you're saving money and adding to your accounts every year, it doesn't really matter what order the stock market returns come in. If you're up 20% one year and down 20% the next, it doesn't really matter because you're growing the portfolio. When you're retired and you're drawing down on that portfolio, it really matters that you don't get those negative returns early in retirement. Because if you're taking money out of your account and the account balances are diminishing because the stock market is down, that can cause you to run out of money early. And those are the returns that cause that 4% rule to be the effect. We know stocks over time earn 10 to 12%, right? That's on an average, but they don't do that every year.
They don't? I thought that was the deal. I thought we get an equal amount every year. No, that's not how it works.
If you find that one, let me know. I'll go into business.
Yeah, I have this guy named Bernie Madoff who manages my money, and he told me I'm going to get an even return every year. I don't think he's around anymore. I think I was having a hard time getting a hold of him recently.
We finally have recent experience with it. When I started in the club and talking about these topics, it was 2018, 2019. It had been a long time since we had a big down market. And then we hit the COVID year. We had a big down market, but for only about 3 months. And then it was right back. So that didn't bother anyone. Finally, we got to 2022. And not only were stocks down pretty good, so were bonds. So the retirees really felt that. So they started to understand sequence of returns risk a little more.
Yeah, it's funny because when I started kind of thinking about, and this is back in the 90s, really, early 90s. And I think at that point we had a sequence of just 10%, 12%, 50%, 20%, whatever it was. And everyone was just sitting there saying, oh, well, you just need X portfolio, you draw 10%, everything's good, it's great, perfect. And then all of a sudden we start learning about sequence of return risk. You mean 10 is really 4? How does that work?
You felt really smart for a while, though, didn't you?
Yeah. And then I realized my goalpost went way further down the distance. I have a question about, do you find when people go into retirement that we talked about the accumulation years where you're basically just putting money away, but in the distribution years, there's kind of a mental mind shift that's required. I know I went through this, but I'm curious, do you find this is very common among people shifting from kind of just putting money away and seeing it grow to, wow, that paycheck has ended and now I need to actually figure out a way to live off of these assets or create new income streams that I didn't have previously?
Absolutely. It's going from a saver's mindset to a spender's mindset. And it really is a mindset change. What I counsel people to do, and it's hard. I'm not saying this is easy, and I can say it. I can say it easily. I can't do it as easily. What you want to do is you want to realize, why did you save all of that money? You didn't save it to get to a certain account balance. It wasn't about the number. You saved it to support your desired lifestyle in retirement. And that does require a mindset shift. And for most of the people, at least that I talk to, it takes a couple years of retirement to make that mental shift so that you're not worried about seeing that account balance fall for the first time. A lot of us, as you mentioned, Mark, depending on when you retired, if you've had several good years of returns, you may not have seen your account balances fall yet. They may still be climbing, right? And once you see them fall, that's when you have a decision to make. First of all, you need to check and make sure you're still on track. But assuming you had a good plan and you are still on track, the fact that it's falling, number one, it's probably temporary. If the markets go down, they usually go back up. And so you need to understand that. But more importantly is this mindset shift What is your desired lifestyle? Do you have enough money to support that? And if you do, then you no longer worry about the account balances. That doesn't become as important. I posted recently in the Rock Retirement Club that I'm stopping tracking our expenses. Tracked it before retirement, tracked it first 6 years of retirement. And I've just decided that's not adding to my life to know what we're spending every month. It's not like we are making a decision whether to buy a new toy for this newborn grandson. It's not affecting our life. So why am I tracking it? It was just noise in my head that I don't need anymore. So I'm not going to do that anymore. I'll still need to know on an annual basis, how much did we spend? Because that's how you do retirement planning, and you make sure you're not overspending, which for some people can be a problem. But that's not the biggest problem I see. The biggest problem is just going from the saver's mentality to a spending mentality. And even then, it's not about spending. It's about living your life and having the money to support that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that's one of the benefits of having kind of the safety first approach, where you have this income stream coming in, as Jim Saulnier likes to say, the bottomless cup of coffee. So you know that this income is going to continually come into your account every month or every other week, however it comes in. And as long as you're staying within that spending amount, you're good to go. So I guess that is one of the benefits of having this kind of safety first approach, as opposed to having to spend out of your portfolio. And that's where I find a lot of people have challenges, is they are afraid to spend out of the portfolio for fear of running out of money. And then most people who have gotten to this point were avid savers, and it's very difficult to switch to say, now I'm going to spend that money. So I'm curious if you have any coaching for, I've figured it out finally myself. So I'm glad to hear I'm normal, that I went through those same stages. But how do you help people kind of shift to that spending, or being more comfortable spending their assets where previously they were just watching it grow?
Yeah, there are a couple ways, one financial, one non-financial. The non-financial way is just to have people think about their lifestyle. And I always say, pick 3 things that if you could add to your life right now, it would be good, that you would like to add. It may be, I want to get with friends more, so I want to do an extra dinner out once a month. It might be a massage. I feel stressed, or my joints hurt. I would like to get a weekly massage. It might be, I want to fly in first class. No more coach for me, or business class if I'm going international. Whatever these things are, pick 2 or 3 of those things. Then pick 2 or 3 things that you would like not to do anymore. Well, there's some you shouldn't do anymore. You shouldn't be up on a ladder as you age, cleaning out the gutters and painting. So you need to hire someone to do that for you. Maybe it's, I hate to cut grass. I happen to like it myself, so I'm still cutting my own grass when we're in Ohio, just because I enjoy it. But there'll be a point when I'll say, I don't want to do this anymore. Whatever the things are that drive you nuts, that you could eliminate by paying some money. Maybe it's having someone to come in and clean your house every other week.
Hear, hear.
Yes.
I did that.
Yeah. So, but what I tell people is, so come up with 2 or 3 on each side, the pluses and the minuses, and then cost that out and add that to your budget. And usually the people I do with, it'll come up and it'll be a total of $2,500 a year. I mean, it's not a lot of money. There are some people who want the new Lamborghini, and you have to help them. But for most of us, it's the simple things that don't cost that much money. You can get your gutters cleaned out once a year for $400. And if you add these things up, it won't blow the budget. And yet you've just improved your lifestyle, and you've started to spend more than you otherwise would. I know a lot of people who have only bought coach airline tickets for their whole life. And if they got an upgrade with points, they were happy, but they would never pay for that. Well, when you talk to people, it's, okay, how many times a year in retirement are you flying? Well, 4. Okay. And maybe it's because the kids live in California and you live on the East Coast. Well, those 4 trips a year, what would it cost you to upgrade to first class? Well, it would cost about $2,000. So it's those kinds of things. So that's the financial side of how to do it, Mark. The financial side is if someone is really struggling, and I know they have enough money, they're so far under that 4% rule, they're spending 2% of their money, but they're not, and their money keeps growing on them. They're growing more money and they're 70 years old. And it's like, why are you still growing money? And so what I tell them is if you can't spend, if you just can't stand to see it, then you need to go more towards the safety first style. You need to acquire, and it doesn't have to be an annuity, which is what I purchased. Maybe it's just, if you're 70, create a 20-year bond ladder that will take you out to your 90th birthday. So you have that extra income coming in and force yourself to spend it. Mark, I've heard you talk about the fun, your fun number and the fun bucket, right?
Yes.
Set aside
the infamous
money.
Fun bucket.
What do you do if you don't spend it? You have a rule, don't you?
Well, no, I just force myself to spend it. I tell myself these are for the over and above items, and I do make myself spend it. And I will have to say I am a work in progress because I do only fly direct now. So I never have any layovers. I always fly economy plus or premium economy. But first class is still one of those things that it's a, well, if the price is right, I'll do it, but it's not an automatic. So I'm baby steps getting it.
Once you go with the lie flat seats for those trips to Asia, you'll never go back. I promise.
Oh boy, I can't tell you how many conversations we had in Slackers about first class or not. And it came down to, it was like a $6,000 upgrade. And we decided that the Singapore Airlines premium economy single seats, which is a trick, and there's only 6 of them on the plane, was the way to go. And we justified that over lay flat. And actually we used a app called Time Shifter that helped us like avoid jet lag. And it actually had us awake most of the flight. So we would have been like sitting in these lay flat seats trying to stay awake, and it would probably been to our detriment. So that's our justification for not upgrading.
So one other tip, because you just made me think of it as you talked about how you made that decision. And what so many of us do is we stay in our savers mentality and we say, okay, if I stay in coach, I can save $6,000. And then we even start thinking, what else could I do with that $6,000, right? It's, man, I could take another trip for that, another vacation for that $6,000. That's not the way to think about it in retirement. In retirement, it's not about the $6,000. It's about the convenience of having those lay flat beds on the plane. It's about being refreshed when you land. It's about your lifestyle. Obviously, you have to subject your lifestyle to financial constraints depending on how much money you have. I'm not saying just spend frivolously, but I am saying this is the mindset shift you need to have. It's not $6,000 because you'll never make that decision. $6,000 is a lot of money still, right?
Well, the answer to the 6,000, the way it came about, and it's funny that you mentioned that because that's exactly what happened. It was like the rest of the trip won't even cost $6,000. If all we do is fly premium economy, it'll pay for everything else.
That's
so
right.
You heard it here. I guess I'm flying first class to Bali this year.
Oh my gosh.
Let's find
Oh
out.
my gosh. No, I'm still in though. I could take another trip for that $6,000.
I hear you, Becky. And look, to be honest, so am I. I'm a work in progress too.
Uh-huh.
But the way I would tell you to look at it is, how many trips to Bali do you think you'll do in your lifetime?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me,
Ooh,
it was
that
one.
maybe
One,
maybe
right?
more than you think.
And so the point is just, it's about lifestyle. It's not about the dollars. Yes, you have to be financially sound with your dollars, but it's about what they're doing for you. Ramit Sethi, I'm sure you've listened to him before, and he says, figure out what's important to you and then spend like crazy on it. Spend 10 times the amount you would normally spend on that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this trip, I'm sure you guys have talked about that at least weekly since you've been back, right? It was a big, exciting adventure.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's important.
That's right.
In retirement.
That's right.
Because we don't know how many of those trips we're going to have.
And the other side of that is, if something is not important to you, then cut mercilessly on that side of it.
Yes. And it's funny because I talk the other side of this coin to people in the catching up to FI phase, right? If you're trying to get there, I really talk to them about avoiding lifestyle creep, because when you get to the top of your income ladder, whatever that is for you, you're earning the most you've ever earned. It is so tempting to start spending that extra money and letting your lifestyle go up to that income. Well, that's not the way to get to a secure retirement. You need to avoid that. And yeah, refocus what you spend on to the things that really matter to you.
And I have a question kind of along those lines. So there's plenty of people in this audience that have come to the concept of the financial aspects and so forth of retirement later in life. And maybe they've now listened to the podcast for a while and started to do some of their own numbers and realized maybe I can't retire as soon as I was hoping to. And I'm in a job that I really don't like. How do you help someone think about maybe a way to have a more balanced lifestyle, if that's what you would suggest? Or how do you, because some people, it's like the answer is you just need to work a little bit longer and save a little bit more and not let lifestyle creep happen. But you don't want that person to be miserable. So any advice for somebody that might be in that situation, or suggestions for anybody?
Yeah, I think if you're truly in a miserable position, and this is what a lot of us who were big savers did, right? We always were putting off enjoyment of life to the future to save every dollar we can save. And so there does need to be a balance there. You need to get to a lifestyle that you can like. And especially if you're starting late and you're going to have to work longer than normal, whatever normal is. We talk about that as though there's a date you're supposed to retire, but there is a date you should get out of a job you don't like. And that's as soon as you can practically do it. And so what I would say is, can you find something that is truer to you, that you will enjoy doing, that you'll be excited about getting up every day and going to work, even if you have to work another 7 years? That's better than putting in the next 8 years at a job you hate. Because number one, you don't know you're going to last 8 years. You're less likely to last 8 years if you're in a stressful job that you dislike. And the other factor on all of this is, and I think it's important for your audience, is unplanned retirements is the biggest risk for your audience, I think. A lot of people think, well, I can just work longer. Well, guess what? Most retirements are unplanned. You're forced out either due to health, loss of a job, companies cutting, trying to get rid of their older workers. It's a caregiving obligation for either your spouse or one of your parents that you just have to go help them. That's what makes most people retire. You don't always have a choice. And your plan shouldn't be, I'm going to work as long as I want, earning the same amount of money, because you may not have that choice.
And Kevin, you talked earlier about the mindset shift from being a saver to being a spender. And there's probably a lot of people in our audience that are dealing with a mindset shift right now, which is in the opposite direction. They've been spenders. I know that was my story, is we were spenders and not savers. And we had to learn to become savers. But the good news is, once we did that, then things did not look as bleak as we thought they were going to. But so I think one of the things I want to bring out here is you've watched people change their mindset. And so we're talking about people that may have to change it from spender to saver. And then later down the road, they can change it back to spender possibly. But the good news is that is possible.
Absolutely. And yes, it is possible. And you get a double benefit when you save, right? Because you're growing money, you're building that investment nest egg. At the same time, you've reduced your spending. Because if, let's say you're making $100,000 a year and you're spending every penny of it, or maybe you're spending 110 and you're going into debt, which has been a lot of people. And it doesn't mean you're just out buying things frivolously. Life may have happened to you. You may have had to help a child. You may have had a calamity at your house, whatever it might be. If you switch from spending the 110 to spending 90 of that 100, now not only are you saving 10 a year and you're growing that money, but now your lifestyle, instead of being at 110, is at 90. Well, you need a lot less money to support 90 than you did 110. So it has that double benefit. And I think seeing that reward is what can really help motivate people to stay on the track of saving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have to make some tough decisions sometimes when you're in those shoes. But I talk about saving being a muscle, and it might be a muscle that people have not exercised in the past, and they have to learn how to use that muscle of saving. But then these decisions, we make a lot of decisions about, am I going to spend money on A or on B? And because I really shouldn't do both. And so those kinds of the practice of those decisions helps us in retirement also, as we were talking about before, of look at what is really going to bring value to our lives and what is not going to bring value to our lives.
Yeah. And what worked for me and the method I like best, Becky, for saving is making it automatic. Some people call it paying yourself first. Mm-hmm. And I did that through my career because I had a goal in mind to retire earlier. And so I set it up to where I never budgeted. I didn't have a goal, or I didn't have a number. I'm only going to spend X dollars on clothes, or I never did budgeting, but I always saved first out of my paycheck and made sure I was doing that, and then could just spend whatever was left over. And we did a pretty good job of that too.
Well, there are some other topics we could discuss about that, but I'd like to move on to the non-financial side of retirement. And can you just help us work through what are some of the things that retirees struggle with when they go from their 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, or whatever it might be? A lot of people don't do that anymore, but when they go from having a schedule to, I am totally open now with what I can do.
Yes, happy to. This is some of my favorite topics to talk about. The first thing I like to start people with is, okay, what do you need to replace from your work? The 5 benefits of work is what I call them. So let's go through those. Financial security. You get a paycheck when you work. You need to have the financial plan in retirement to replace that paycheck, obviously. Time management. You talked about you're gone 9 to 5. You know what you're doing 9 to 5 every day, plus your commute on each side, plus the working at home that you're doing. You've got a lot of time left over when you retire. But the problem with that is your job gave you time management. You knew where you were going to be Monday through Friday. Now you don't. And so time management is something we get from a job that we need to replace in retirement. The third one, and frankly, the most important of these, I think, are the relationships. How many of us, when you think about your best friends, are they all people you work with, that you've worked with for years? Maybe this is going to be different for our children who are moving jobs a lot more than we did. I stayed with one law firm my entire career. So that's 80% of my friendships were through work. Mm-hmm. And not only that, even if they're not close friends, they're people you spend every day with. Well, when you retire, it's just you. There's not a group of retirees that you go to every day. That's why things like the Rock Retirement Club are great, but it's not going to work every day, going to the proverbial water cooler and talking about the game last night or the TV show you watched or what your kids are doing. You don't have that. So the relationships about work, the social aspects of it, extremely important. The last two almost seem egotistical, but they're true. You get a sense of status, whatever you do. But certainly people I work a lot, as you mentioned, with professionals and executives. Sort of the higher you were up on the ladder, the more the status became your identity. You were the vice president of this or the president of that, or you were doctor, or you were a lawyer, and that became your identity. So that status is something that you need to think about. How are you going to replace that? Or you're going to be left with a void. So identity, status, that's a real important one. And then the last one is just the simple fact of feeling useful. Because you know you're useful when you're on a job because they give you a paycheck every week to prove it. And regardless of what you're doing, you can be on the assembly line turning one bolt, but you know you're useful to them or they wouldn't pay you. They wouldn't give you a job with benefits. Well, when you retire, you don't get those attaboys that you get with your annual reviews. So you need to replace those 5 benefits from work, Becky, as you transition into retirement. You need to have a plan for those things. So that's the first half of what a retiree struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
They need to replace their work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then the step beyond that are the issues that as a retirement coach, I deal with a lot. Are you living a life filled with purpose and meaning? Now, let me explain what I mean by those terms, because it's not always self-evident. Purpose is something that makes you feel useful to the world. You're helping either another person, a place, or a thing. And by that, I mean, maybe you're just going around and helping clean up the community park. Maybe it's your daily walk through the park and you clean up trash. That gives you a sense of purpose. You're helping someone other than yourself. Meaning is more personal. It's what matters to you. Are you doing the things that matter to you? What is important to Becky isn't going to be important necessarily to Kevin. And that's fine. You need to reflect on it. Too often, I think, during our careers, that's been our purpose, right? It's having a job. It's whatever we did for our job. Maybe it was serving clients, or maybe it was helping to build something. Maybe it was selling something, whatever it was, that gave us a sense of purpose. In retirement, we need to look more reflective, be more reflective, and look inside ourselves as to what matters to me. How can I make a difference in the world, and pursue those things? Mm-hmm. The other ones, let me just hit the list, and then I'm happy to talk about any of them with you.
Sure. Resilience,
so important in retirement. You'll have aches and pains all the time in retirement, injuries, sicknesses of not only yourself, your spouse, your parents, your children. So resilience is so important in retirement because things come at you fast, big things. Health and wellness. Obviously, most of us think about that as we near retirement. Not how long am I going to live, it's how long am I going to be healthy.
Right.
And that's so important. Leisure, we talked about that a little bit before. Leisure's great, but it's got to be a diversion to whatever you're getting your purpose from. Relationships, we talked about. Caregiving, how to be a good caregiver to your parents, to your spouse, to whoever your loved ones are that needs you to give them care, to be able to do it in a way that helps not only them, but you. Because for some people, caregiving can be such a drain and it can destroy your retirement. There are ways to go about it that can make it both positive for you and for your loved ones. Grandparenting is another topic that you have to deal with in retirement that I'm so looking forward to learning more about. Leaving a legacy is another one. And I don't mean the money, although for some people that's important and that's fine. But how do you want to be remembered? That's something you take up and think about as you go into retirement. Personal development. There, I think about things like lifelong learning. And the health and wellness, I guess, is part of that as well. But it's just, what kind of a person do you want to be? Are you going to quit growing the minute you retire from your job? Or are you going to keep growing? What are your goals? Setting goals are so important. So those are some of the issues that retirees do struggle with that we try to help them with.
Mm-hmm. I know personally, I was put in that caregiving spot for many, many years, and it is tough. And you don't know, before you step into something that you've never done before, you don't know what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, and a lot more when it's all said and done. So I think that one of the things that I feel good about is when I'm in a group of people, and this has happened at Camp Fives, where most of the people are quite a bit younger than I am, but you can be in a caregiving position at any age. And one of the things I feel good about is I've been able to sit down with folks that are sort of at the beginning of that journey and give them some pointers about, here's what you're going to experience, and that's going to be normal because it's going to feel really odd. I mean, before my caregiving years were done, I realized at the very end, for example, it got to be so hard, I realized I should have sought out some counseling for myself because just moving from one day to the next seemed like almost more than I could do at some points. And by the time I realized that, it was at the very end of my mom's life, and I never took action on it. But now it's something that I wish I had, and I can encourage other people to do that, because you've got to take care of yourself when you're being a caregiver. So that's just an example.
That's a great tip. The other one that I give, and that's always number one on the list, is take care of yourself first. 2 is set boundaries. You have to know what you can do, and both mentally and physically. Don't overcommit, because then it will become so negative for you that it will also become negative to your loved one. And you need to know what you can do and what you can't. A lot of people, this is another one of those getting to the spending mindset. That's why that money is there. Spend it on help. I tell people when they're talking about long-term care policies is you're not buying it for yourself. You're buying it for your loved ones so they don't have to take care of you. Because often I know of people who won't have someone come in and help them with, maybe it's cooking, maybe it's cleaning, just sort of long-term care type things. They won't have them do it because they want to save that money as a legacy to their kids. Now, that's not what your kids want. Your kids want you to live a wonderful, dignified life at the end. So know what you can do when you're giving care. And if you've got the money to do it, use that to assist you.
So, Kevin, I have a question for you. So I know firsthand that it is challenging to figure out your new identity, especially if, like, I was in a career my entire life. So I identified as a money manager for 25 years. And when you get into retirement, as you said, people struggle with walking away from that identity. And I know that for probably 2 years, I was like, well, I used to, or I retired from, but I didn't say, I had no clue as to, well, who am I today? And I have purpose and meaning today, and it took me a while to figure it out. But how would you suggest people kind of go about figuring out their new identity or new purpose and meaning? Any suggestions on how someone should explore figuring that out?
Yeah. First thing I do is I have them do some exercises designed at sort of opening their mind to what would the ideal retirement lifestyle be for you? What does it involve? We divide up the retirement world or life into 6 life arenas. And I tell one of them is career and work, which for a retiree doesn't necessarily mean working a job, might be volunteering, whatever you're doing for your purpose, your main core activity. So for you right now, Mark, it might be doing a podcast. It might be the education you do for youth and financial literacy, whatever's giving you purpose. That's your career work life. Then there's the family life and relationships, third party, all your friends and acquaintances. Then there's the self life, what you do for Mark, what are your interests? And then leisure is another one of those arenas. And so I tell people, divide up your life into those 6 areas. And how would you ideally like to spend your life energy or your time among those? When we're working on our careers, that career and work probably ought to be about 60%, but for a lot of really highly successful people, it may be 90%, right? You may be ignoring. Spiritual is the other one I left off on that list, I think. You might be ignoring your family. A lot of us did that too much probably during our careers, but it's readjust those areas of your life. And as you come up with those, Mark, and find out what gives you meaning and purpose, those are going to lead to your new identity. Maybe it's an educator, and that's something that's meaningful to you. If you have charities you love, maybe it's as a philanthropist, and it doesn't have to be money philanthropy. It can be your time and your efforts that you're giving to the causes you care about. Those kinds of identities are important. Those are some of the external. The familial ones are extremely important. I'm anxious to, one of my new identities when I went into retirement was to have a new and better relationship with our children. They were getting out of college, starting their careers. So you need to go from parent to wise counselor, I hope, role. So changing that role, I wanted to have a good relationship with them. And so that became part of my identity. Now that I'm a new grandfather, that's going to become another one. So you adopt those for the things that are important to you, and then that will replace that money manager. And you're always going to be a money manager. You're always going to tell people about that. That was a great part of your life. But now, what matters now will be the new identities.
So for someone who didn't think about this before retirement, when should people start thinking about this, and how should they go about maybe thinking about themselves 2.0? Is there like a timeline ahead of that kind of retirement period that they should be starting to think about this?
Yeah, it's very personal because some people are just so stressed out in their career that they don't have much bandwidth to give this. So I think it's at least the last year or two before retirement, you should start thinking about it. Ideally, it would be 3 to 5 years out. And frankly, I say the same thing on the money side. You need to start planning at least 5 years out to sort of get your money to where you want it to be when you start retirement. And by getting your money, I'm not just talking about growing the amount, though that's important. Those last 5 years of savings and growing your money are as important as any 5 years, just due to compounding. But I'm talking of positioning your money. Do you have all your money in tax deferred accounts that you're not going to be able to get to very easily in retirement without big tax consequences? So maybe you want to set some cash aside that you're going to spend. You want to have some money maybe in some Roth accounts that you can pull from and not affect your taxable income. All those kinds of things that I know you've talked about on the podcast before with people much smarter on those topics than I am. But it's really 3 to 5 years is ideal, but a lot of people just don't have the bandwidth for it. We see this all the time in the Rock Retirement Club. People will join, and then the number one complaint we hear of those who complain, and not many do, fortunately, but the ones who do is, I don't have enough time for it. They haven't created the bandwidth. One thing, and I got this from Roger Whitney, so I'll give him credit, but it's sort of, hey, the last year or two of your work, you still want to give 100% effort to your job. You just don't want to give that 110 that you've always given. You don't do your job, do it well. We're not talking about retiring on the job, but we're talking about where's your mind going? I would get home from a day at the law firm and I would think about what I was going to do the next day at the law firm. Well, you don't have to do that in your last couple of years. Those hours, maybe you spend on retirement planning, both financial and non-financial, and thinking about what identity do I want to have? And Mark, one thing I'll tell you, and I know you found this out just serendipitously because you said you didn't have a plan for the non-financial side, but you don't have to have it all figured out before you retire. You can do it and be very successful. It's just a good idea to think about it before and to do planning. You're always better off planning than not planning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agree 100%.
And then, Kevin, what happens when you make your plan, you get into retirement, and it doesn't at all look like what you planned? Do you ever see that happen?
Only with every retiree. Very few of us have a plan and stick to it. And sometimes it's because we're still changing people. Mm-hmm. You know, what I enjoyed doing the day I retired, I had never heard of pickleball, I don't think. Now I play pickleball 3 or 4 times a week. I played this morning for a couple hours with a bunch of friends. It's a big part of my retirement life now. It's my health and wellness solution as well as my relationship solution. So that's one that wasn't part of my plan. On the financial side, yeah, you can have things happen. Our home here in Florida was hit by a hurricane 2 years ago. And so that did 2 things. One, it ended up being a 6-figure loss, even after insurance that I hadn't planned for. But probably more importantly, it basically took 1.5 years to get everything back to where we're comfortable. Every day now is not hurricane repairs on my mind. Mm-hmm. So it just completely disrupted our life for quite a while. And yet life still goes on.
Right. So the point there is that it's okay that I definitely would want to make a plan, but it's okay if it doesn't end up looking like what your plan was. And
Not
that's the being resilient part, right?
It is, and not only is it, it's not a failed plan. Don't even think of it that way. Know, when you make your plan, know that it's going to be different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We talk about adjusting those plans every year. That's why I sort of, the 4% rule is great when you're saving money and you sort of keeping track. Okay, I need 25 times what I'm going to spend before I retire. That's good to know about. It's useless when you retire. I don't know of anyone who spends the exact same amount every year.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great target to shoot for, but when it comes to retirement and actually drawing down, it's a whole different methodology and story.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree 100%. It's a good goal, but it's not the end all be all.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing about retirement that I found is most of the big financial things come with just as big of a non-financial impact. I mentioned the hurricane. It hit in late September of 2022. For the next year, that was the predominant thing on my mind was recovering from that hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it just took over my life basically for a year. So yes, it had a financial impact, but the non-financial was bigger. Same thing, the bigger type losses we suffer: loss of a spouse, dementia of a spouse, or some Parkinson's, some illness that's going to lead to premature death. Yes, it's going to have a big financial impact on your plan, but more importantly, it's going to completely change what you thought you wanted to do because you had plans together as a couple. You no longer have that. Mark, you've learned this lesson.
I can vouch for that.
You can
That's
certainly
for sure.
vouch for that.
Yeah.
I just thought of that as I'm giving this example. I'm like, why am I saying this? This Mark is, your life is completely changed. You would say you've got a great life now, but it's completely changed and you've had to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I want to encourage folks also. One thing that I have learned in retirement is just to try new things, even if it's something that you never thought you'd ever do, kind of like podcasting.
Or surfing.
Or surfing. That's right. I call Mark my adventure buddy because we love.
It sounds like pickleball for Kevin.
That's right.
Pickleball is his found passion.
Yeah, and one thing I brag about is I've taught Becky how to play and about 49 others. I think I've taught 50 people in the last 2 years, brought them to game. In fact, we had one new player this morning with us, so 51 now. And I think it's great because I love it. It's great for competitive spirit. It's good exercise, and the social aspects of it are incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, based on the time that we're recording this, and if you said you played for a couple of hours before we recorded this, it sounds like a pretty early morning.
No, we started at 8:30 this morning, so that was fine.
Okay. All right.
That's right.
I'm on the East Coast. I'm on the East Coast. You're out in the
different
mountains.
time zones. Yeah, that's true.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
For me, it would have been really
We're
early.
still asleep. We were still asleep when you were playing. Oh, my goodness. Kevin, this conversation has been wonderful. There are so many more things that I would love to sit and chat with you about, but we have kind of come to the end of our time. And I just wanted to thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about, a lot that we can put on our radar for down the road of when folks start getting nearer to retirement. And I want to ask you two last questions. One is, do you have any particular resources that you love that folks can use for these ideas? And also, do you have any specific tips for our audience of late starters?
Let me take the second one first. And I already mentioned these, but I want to reiterate them. If you're a late starter, be careful to put all of your eggs in the basket that I can work and earn this high income until whatever age. You don't know that today. So have a plan that is resilient, that can accept changes in that schedule, and you'll just be a lot happier. Also, avoid the lifestyle creep. The lower your lifestyle costs, the less your lifestyle costs, the easier it is to catch up and be ready to retire. So those are those tips. As far as resources, it sounds self-serving because, as you said, I'm a coach in the Rock Retirement Club, but I think it is a great vehicle for learning both the financial and non-financial side. but you don't have to go to that club. There are lots of retirement groups out there online. I would get involved in that and learn as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of it's not a resource, but it's just a suggestion that this is a new topic, retirement, both financial and non-financial. There's a lot out there that you can learn about it. Just take the time to do that.
Great.
And is there a place to find certified retirement coaches or chartered retirement planning counselors? Because those are newer terms to me, and I'm just curious if there's a group organization that people could seek out if they're looking for this kind of thought process to go through with somebody else.
Yes, on the coaching side, which is the non-financial side of retirement, the Retirement Coaches Association. It's the Professional Association for Retirement Coaches. They have a list of coaches on a map, so you can, if you want to meet one in person, although frankly, all the coaching I do is virtual, so you don't need a coach near you necessarily, but you can find one. They've got them on a map, and you can find lists of certified retirement coaches. On the planning side, Mark, it's not the designation. I wouldn't go look for a CRPC or a CFP. What I would look for is a financial advisor who specializes in retirement planning, because that's very different from one who is just managing money. And they'll run a plan and say, you've got enough money to retire, but they're not retirement planners. That is a specialization that I think is critical to retirees to have if you're going to use an advisor.
Yeah, I would concur with that. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, Kevin, if anyone in our audience wants to connect with you, what is the best way to do that?
Kevin Lyles at rockretirementclub.com. You can send me an email and I'll be happy to get back to you.
Great. Mark, do you have any other questions before we close?
I don't. I do have one question.
All right.
So what is it that you are now called that you are a grandpa or grandparent? Do you have a name?
I do. I am Papa.
Papa.
Awesome.
Okay.
My
Papa
father-in-law was Papa before he passed, so I've inherited it. And I claimed that right this year at Christmas by wearing his Santa Claus suit. And I'll send you a picture of Santa with my grandson. How's that, Mark?
Aww,
congratulations.
Nice. And what is Grandma's name?
Yaya, which I don't even understand.
Yaya.
I think it's from some Greek movie she got it. Yaya.
Nice. I love it. All right. Well, thanks so much, Kevin. This has been wonderful. I know that the folks are going to really benefit from the conversation that we had today. So I appreciate you taking out the time for us.
Thanks, Becky and Mark. I really enjoyed it.
All right. We'll see you next time on Catching Up to Fi.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to Fi. We would appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review so that our message can reach others.
We are not lawyers, financial advisors, accountants, or tax experts. Please consult your own professional advisors before making any important decisions. Our content is for entertainment and education purposes only.
We'll see you next time on Catching Up to Fi.